Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Lane Kiffin, the Ole Miss Rebels, a team that we've talked a ton about the last couple of weeks in the transfer portal. I think just showed the country why they are pushing the chips into the middle of the table heading into the 2024 season. Absolutely shellacking Penn State, and 38-25 I don't think is indicative of how lopsided this game was. And this Ole Miss team just put up over 500 total yards, 38 total points on a Penn State defense that only allowed 11.8 points per game. That was number 3 in the country, and only 230 yards of total offense per game. That was number 1 in the country. Phenomenal performance by Ole Miss. I want to talk a little bit about what we just saw, then talk about what this team is going to look like in 2024. Again, a team that in the 12-team college football playoffs, I don't even know if they need the 12-team college football playoff next year, because this is a team that looks to be one of the more dangerous teams in college football heading into 2024. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys. This is an Ole Miss program that's been a blast to talk about the last couple of weeks. The amount of support you guys have shown the boys has truly been amazing. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, would love to see or hear how you guys are feeling in the comment section. Let us know. Dill, going to give you the tee box here. Ole Miss put a beat down on Penn State. How we feeling?
I mean, just a very complete football game. And you're absolutely right. That score is not at all indicative of how lopsided that game was. I mean, a couple big plays from Penn State that were lucky, let's say, to say the least, and then a little bit of garbage time work. So didn't really give up that many yards, really controlled the tempo. From that first play, from that first drive on, physically looked like the better team on both sides of the ball. Just, I mean, a very as complete of a game, I think, as I've seen Ole Miss play in this whole year.
You're starting to see, and this is the whole narrative around this Ole Miss team is closing the gap. That's kind of what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks and how they're trying to do that. It starts along the line of scrimmage, and we don't have any question marks about the running backs and the wide receiver play, and we'll talk about that. That's a Penn State team, as a Michigan fan, one of, if not the best defensive lines that you'll see in the entire country. And I thought Ole Miss did a pretty good job up front establishing the run, keeping Jackson Dart clean. But I want to talk about Jackson Dart. Dill, he's taking the step. And we said this going into the season. Jackson Dart might be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC when you look up at the end of the season. I think a lot of people are saying that. But for me, what's most exciting going into next year, 2024, his only 4th year of college football, when all these quarterbacks are going into their 5th, 6th, 7th years, Dill, Jackson Dart continues to get better. And when you look at the talent that he's going to have around him and the play calling that he's going to have with Lane Kiffin, Jackson Dart's probably in line to have the best season we've seen from an Ole Miss quarterback in quite a while.
I mean, doesn't it just feel like the game's slowing down for him a little bit? Like Penn State was putting pressure on him. They were getting home a little bit, but the ball was getting out so quickly, so accurately, going to the right places, never really putting the ball in harm's way at all, getting into his hot routes. It just a really masterful performance. And that's the one thing you were kind of waiting for Jackson Dart. It's like you always kind of saw the playmaking ability, even going back to last year, but you didn't really see it. You saw too many taking sacks, too many putting the ball in harm's way. You just didn't do any of that today against, again, probably one of the best defenses you probably would have seen. That was pretty much at full strength. And he had like 1 or 2 opt-outs, but for the most part, they were really, I mean, that looked like the defense you've seen all year. He just played such an incredible game.
Yeah, like some of those and you said it best. Yeah, we all know Jackson Dart and his skill set. Like, this is one of the more talented quarterbacks that you see in college football, from an arm talent, from what he can do with his legs. But it was nice to see him kind of manage the pocket. And there were some muddy pockets. Again, that's not necessarily an indictment on the Ole Miss offensive line as much as there are a bunch of NFL dudes on that Penn State defensive line. Jackson Dart stepping up, delivering strikes. When it was time to use his athleticism, break the pocket, he was able to do that as well. I thought it was really balanced in terms of how in command he was of the offense, playing within the offense. And then when it was time to go out and make a play, which when you're trying to do something special, like Ole Miss is trying to do in 2024, you need quarterbacks that can do that. He was able to do so. One other thing I have in my notes, the deep ball. Like him pushing and attacking that deeper third, that was a little bit of a problem. You always knew he had the arm talent to do so. It was just not really consistent last year. What you saw from Jackson Dart today and kind of on the season as a whole, you'll love to see what he's doing pushing the football down the field, especially when you talk about the weapons that he's going to have to attack with in 2024.
I mean, that's the exciting part. And you see how good Trey Harris was. It's just an unbelievable game. It's felt like anytime they threw the ball to him, no matter how tight the coverage was, the ball was on time, accurate, all those things you want to see. But just the ability to make those catches one after another, just unbelievable, especially early on in that game when Penn State really was revved up and they were getting home a lot. It just like that connection those two had was just really magical. And I can't wait to see what else they come in with when you got Juice Wells coming in. Who knows if anyone else is coming over? Evan Stewart. I mean, that type of offense, I don't know how you deal with it because, again, Trey Harris is such a monster. One-on-one coverage, I just don't see how you deal with them. And then on the other side, I mean, Prescorn obviously shouldn't leave him out. He's a stud. You're just going to have so many weapons to deal with. But that connection they're going to have, I'd like to think, is just going to be – I mean, that's next level. And
two things that you said I want to point out. One, if you needed another selling point for Evan Stewart to come to Ole Miss, like they just hung 40 points and over 500 total yards on one of the best defenses that we've seen across the country this year. Evan Stewart, you know you're going to get your touches. You know you're going to put up a lot of points in this offense. Two, and more importantly, regardless of Evan Stewart winds up in Oxford or not, the Trey Harris connection, those guys have only been together for what, less than 12 months? Like, what does that look like this time next year when Ole Miss is making a push for a national championship, ideally? Like another year of chemistry and spring ball and summer workouts with those two. And you're looking at, we saw like
it looked unstoppable in that first half. It just like there was nothing Penn State could do to deal with that match. But when you have it, it's
so important, though. We talk about it all the time, like a quarterback wide receiver battery. You look at the teams that have won national championships. You go down to Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, or Justin Jefferson, and you go back to Bryce Young and some of the receivers that he had. Having a quarterback wide receiver connection that's elite is massive. And it looks like Ole Miss might have one of the better duos in terms of Jackson Dart and Trey Harris that you see in the country. And you mentioned it best. I mean, when you have someone like Trey Harris, that is, you need to have a safety over the top. Like that's the only really way you can defend him. You have a guy like Caden Prescorn work in the middle of the field, being just an absolute threat. I believe he had 10 catches for over 100 and something yards. There's too many weapons on this team. And then you had a guy like Juice Wells, who's just elite with the ball in space. You look at this Ole Miss offense and just the passing attack, not even talking about Quinshaw Judkins in the backfield. It's an offense that doesn't seem like it's going to get stopped very many times in 2024.
And you don't want to ignore how impressive putting up almost 150 yards rushing on this Penn State defense.
Yes.
That defensive front, I mean, that linebacker defensive line combo, Abdul Carter might be one of the better players, period, in college football. In what they were able to do, Kobe King, same thing. I mean, they're really good. And Ole Miss did run the ball really effectively, all things considered. Again, it wasn't going to be a 200-plus yard rushing game. That's just Penn State's too good for that. But to be able to be balanced, or at least relatively balanced against a defense like that is, again, something Ole Miss at times, they have been overwhelmed physically by teams that have those really top-flight defenses. You just didn't see any of that today, even up front, where, again, they gave up some stuff, but like they really did hold their own, I thought, for the most part.
That's a very good point. Like where you see Ole Miss, again, like kind of going back to the narrative of like what do you need to do in terms of closing the gap? You've seen them struggle when what did Lane Kiffin say? How do you kind of get to win a national championship? He says, look like Georgia. And why does he say that? Because the teams that give Ole Miss the problems are the teams that are physically overwhelming along the line of scrimmage. Penn State's one of those teams. And Ole Miss like kind of held their own. And again, you look at next year, it's only going to get better. One more thing on the offense before we move to the defense real quick. Lane Kiffin, I can't remember if he's had a quarterback for 3 straight years, a starting quarterback.
No, I was thinking that.
So you're getting like the chemistry between, okay, what is Jackson Dart like in certain situations? What are the plays that are kind of what he's most confident in? You rarely get to see a quarterback be a 3-year starter under the same head coach and same play caller. You're going to see that in 2024. And I think that's where you're going to see the peak of this offense because you're already starting to see them get more comfortable with what Jackson Dart likes, what Lane Kiffin likes calling. This is going to be a really fun offense in 2024. Dill, flipping to the defense, Penn State came into the season being like, hey, we got 2 dog running backs. We got a really, really good offensive line. We are going to physically impose our will. And after that first 2 drives, I mean, Ole Miss in the front 7 absolutely nails.
I mean, they really did start to eat them up a little bit. And that, again, their defensive line's been playing pretty good all year for the most part, maybe with the exception of that Georgia game. But I mean, you kind of talk about what they have and what's coming back. The Pegas, Ivy. You see what they're adding, obviously, with the portal with Nolan and Princely U.
And Tyler Barron, Chris Paul.
I don't want to disrespect any, and I can't list them all because there's too many, and they're all so good. But you just kind of think forward to what this defense has been building up to, getting better, getting more physical, getting tougher. Add all that talent. I mean, again, is Penn State like the best offense in the world? Obviously not, but still, you still see that physicality that they'd have to go take it to a really good offensive line. I know they don't threaten you a ton in the air, but
and again, that was more I've won Penn State. I don't think many people know this, and I'm not going to stand up here and argue that Penn State's an offensive juggernaut. They were 15th in the country scoring 35 points per game. It's not like a slouch defense. It's not like an inept defense. And Ole Miss kind of made them look like that. And again, you see the 25 points and 500 total yards. 150 of those yards kind of garbage time, and the other 150 were kind of broken plays, some tight end tunnels that probably aren't a consistent. There was nothing I should say that Penn State did on offense that was consistently beating Ole Miss. There was a few kind of gimmick plays because that's what they had to do to kind of
beat. Penn State could catch them, they could catch them. You're right, but there was nothing they could do just man on man that
in the secondary
line it up and beat us. They can.
I guess the one thing we'll close out on is what is Ole Miss selling in the transfer portal? I think everyone thinks it's they're just throwing money at everybody, and no doubt the Old Grove collective is getting it done, no doubt about it. But what is Lane Kiffin selling in 2024 to a lot of these guys? It's a national championship. This is an Ole Miss program that this was their first 11-win season in program history, and so you're selling. We're doing something special in 2024. And if there's any more targets, Evan Stewart again, and some other names that they're going after that are thinking about going to Ole Miss to do something special with a team that can be special, you just saw the evidence. That was probably the best selling point Lane Kiffin can have on the transfer portal recruiting trails. Look at what this team can be in 2024. If you're an Ole Miss fan, massive win, 11-win season, that's something to be fired up about. 8 months. 8 months, baby, and it's 2024, and that is what you're excited about. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.